Hi everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am sorry that it has been a while since my last post and I kind of left y'all hanging. It's been a while, several months. So as I mentioned before, I am a nurse, and as everyone knows, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. So things have been wild at work. I'm actually floating out of the OR for the first time in my entire career to ICU, which has been a great opportunity to learn. However, it's been extremely challenging and quite the learning curve and a little overwhelming at times, but overall it's been good. And Cody actually had some events in his health since the last time I posted a video, which I want to say was like 6 months ago, sorry. But yeah, so we've just kind of been dealing with life and whatnot, but things are finally simmering down in the Childress household. So I'm gonna try and get a video up every week or every other week. That is my goal, however life happens, so we'll see how that goes. I've got what I want to talk about today written down, so if you see me looking down, that's why. I don't want to go off on like a little rambling spree because I'm really good at that. So let's see. So since the last video, we did make a trip back up to Mayo in September of 2020. Co started experiencing some symptoms that correlated with an angry bile ducts, and his liver enzymes were extremely high. He was running a lot of fevers, no appetite, unexplained weight loss. I guess it's not really unexplained if he didn't have an appetite, but he was losing a lot of weight really quickly. His eyes were turning yellow again, just overall not feeling well. So we did some blood work, did some scans, went ahead and made the trip up to Mayo, which is where he's been treated for this since April of 2019. We exclusively go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, which I will have an entire video on that topic specifically because that is kind of a long story. But after about a week of diagnostics and testings and lab work and all that fun stuff, we found out that he had a mild bile duct infection. And I say it's mild. For a regular healthy person, it wouldn't have been considered mild, but for what he's been through and the fact that he was septic a year and a half ago now, it was very mild for him. And so mild infection within those bile ducts, not to be unexpected after everything he's went through and after he had his biliary catheter for so long. Again, I will get into all of that. And he also had what we were basically told was just sick bile ducts around the site of where they had to do radiation post resection. And so they kind of adjusted and tweaked his meds, changed some things out, added some things in, and he's been doing a lot better. He is getting over COVID. I worked really hard to keep him COVID free, and I made it about 9 months before he ended up catching it, which I'm surprised it took that long, just because he is susceptible to infections more so than a healthy person. But he was down with that for over 3 weeks. He never had to be hospitalized for it, something that we were very grateful. And so it's just taken him a long time to recover, but he's finally on the mend, finally feeling back to himself a little bit more so than when he had it full blown, but he's not back to where he was after treatment before COVID. So we're just keeping a close eye on everything, and we're corresponding with his docs up north and just kind of taking it day by day. So that is that. Let's see my list of things that I want to talk about. So I guess this video I will just be continuing telling our story, just so you kind of have a background of, sorry, my camera cut me off. But I think I'm just gonna keep going through our story just so you have a little bit of background information on how everything happened for us and went down for us. And then I was kind of brainstorming today. I think I'm gonna do something, it's like a little mini series about various topics I want to talk about, just because I've got like 2.5, almost 3 years of stuff I want to share and talk about. So I'm trying to figure out how to break it up to where we're not watching Harry Potter length movies on YouTube of me blabbing forever. So hang tight, I will get some of those up, but I was just going to kind of keep going with our story where I left off. Last video was that he was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma. At the time they thought it was stage 2, and it might have been stage 2 at that time, but they meet on, let's see, that was September 11th, 2018. Craziness. And within 48 hours we had been transferred to MD Anderson in downtown Houston at the medical center. Cody was a young 29-year-old overall healthy guy. The only previous medical history he had was that he has had Crohn's disease since he was 13, and other than that, nothing. He wasn't overweight, he didn't have diabetes, he didn't have high blood pressure. That was the only thing that he'd been diagnosed with, and that he'd been treating with Remicade infusions every 6 weeks to keep him in remission for the Crohn's disease, which it had ever since he started Remicade. I think by the time he started that, he was 13 or 14, and up until he was 29 he was on it, and we never saw any issues with it. So my point being is that MD Anderson was really excited to see him, and we got in right away because the way we were explained it to us is that cholangiocarcinoma is not a young people's cancer, meaning that the majority or the average population that is diagnosed with this cancer are in their 60s, 70s or above, and they have other diseases, comorbidities. Cody did not fit that at all, and so they got him in right away, and within 48 hours we were in downtown Houston, and we met with Dr. Vote, who is on the surgical oncology team for MD Anderson, and we were told he was the best of the best. We live about 2 hours north of Houston, so logistically this made the most sense for us to go there. And when you think of cancer, at least in our area, when you think of cancer and treatment, you go straight to MD Anderson. That's the best of the best. That's what has kind of been ingrained to us here. And so we went there. I'm trying to think of exactly how everything went down. Initially they told us that it did look like it could be surgical, and so however they wanted to get his symptoms under control, because at this point his bilirubin was like 12 or something crazy. His liver enzymes were almost in the thousands. He was super jaundiced, super itchy, just overall felt like junk. And he had the gray stools, which is another sign that your bile ducts are not working, because the bile ducts produce bile, which then is excreted by the liver into the intestines, and that's what helps absorb fats, and that's what gives stool the brown color. So if there's no brown in your stool, you probably have a bile duct issue or biliary issue of some kind, and he was having all of those. So the main being jaundice and extremely itchy. He still has scars from the itchiness from that first initial diagnosis. When we were in the hospital a few days after this, he was asleep. I watched him, he was dead asleep, and he was scratching his foot on the footboard of the hospital bed. There's handles there and little openings, and he had his foot stuck in one of the openings and was scratching the top of it while he was dead asleep. I've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely insane. There I go with the rambling, getting off track. Y'all gotta keep after me. Okay. Initially we were told that they could cut it out, and we were super excited because after they said it was cholangiocarcinoma, I immediately got online and started reading about that, and the first thing I saw was that there was a 20 to 30% chance of or 30 to 20% chance of life expectancy after 2 years. That was humbling. It's hard to talk about that moment. I can feel my heart racing just thinking back to that time. And further reading showed me that this tumor in the bile ducts does not respond to chemo. Historically, has not responded to chemo, doesn't like it. And so the only prognosis that turned out well was if you could have the tumor fully resected, removed. So when I found out they were transferring us to the surgical oncology team, Cody kept asking me what that meant, and I said, it's good news. As long as the surgical team keeps working with us and thinks that they can cut it out and plans to do so, we're golden. That's the best case scenario. So, said they were gonna cut it out, but we needed to get his symptoms under control and get the jaundice under control. So they did several endoscopy procedures where they put the camera down and go and check everything out from the inside. And then they actually did a biliary catheter placement. Cody had some complications with that from pain, and the initial tube size was not big enough, so it was leaking around the site, which is not good. And so we were actually in the hospital with that for, I wanna say 3 or 4 days. And they had to take him back to the procedural room and redo the tube, swap it out, all that stuff. So we were there for a while. Got that settled, did more scans, and they told us that they did not believe that they could cut it out at that time. So this is probably 2 weeks post-diagnosis. So we are now towards the end of September. They boot us over across the hall to the medical oncology team. And when I tell you, my husband's shoulders slumped and he looked at me like when he realized that he was going to the medical team and the surgical team couldn't work with him at that time, I felt like the biggest failure. Because I told them, as long as the surgery team keeps talking to us, you're gonna do great. It's gonna be fine. We're gonna get it out. We're gonna get it out right now. This isn't gonna be an issue. Like, it'll be great. Oh, I was such a sweet summer child then. Very naive about the whole cancer process, because it's never as it seems. So we were transferred then to Milden Jovley, Dr. Jovley, who was very well known in the cholangiocarcinoma world. And he told us that they were going to put him on chemo to shrink the tumor and then hopefully get us back over to the surgery team to have it cut out. So we did 9 months of chemo. Cody was on the gemcitabine, cisplatin, and Abraxane. They had said that the tumor these types of tumors had not previously responded at all to the gemcitabine cisplatin combo, but they were confident at the time that the Abraxane was a third drug they added into this combination, it would work. And seemingly it did. Once we actually had the tumor resected, it's hard to say if the chemo actually worked or if this tumor just hid very well on his scans. So the thing about cholangiocarcinomas is that they hide so well on scans, and that's partially why they are so deadly, in the sense that a lot of times you will not see them on a scan until you start showing symptoms, and by that time it's usually fairly advanced. So it appeared at the time that the tumor was shrinking, that his CA19, his cancer antigen, and his liver enzymes trended down the direction we wanted. But then after 5 or 6 months, I want to say it was 5 or 6 months, he kind of just stopped responding and just kind of plateaued. But he started getting really bad neuropathies, so numbness and tingling in his feet, which to this day he still doesn't have all of that feeling back. And so they had to stop the Abraxane, the one chemo they told us was actually going to be working, because the original combo of the other two didn't usually work. They had to stop the main chemo they were relying on, because what quality of life do you have if you're 29 and you can't feel your feet? And it was spreading to his hands and just his joints. He said he was just having a lot of joint pain, a lot of which has never gone away. And so we decided collectively with Dr. Jovley that we were going to stop the Abraxane and just kind of keep hoping for the best. So that's what we did. And his cancer antigens started to go up a little. Oh, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. They kept trending down. And Dr. Jovley even put in to have the biliary catheter removed, which I'm going to do a whole video just on biliary catheters. And when I say catheter, it's not the kind of catheter that you would instantly think about. It's not a urinary catheter that goes in the bladder. It's the catheter that's going to go into the liver, directly into the bile ducts, and it allows the so in Cody's situation, the tumor had grown so large that it was pressing down on other bile ducts, which was causing an obstruction and not letting the bile flow through. So it was just staying in the liver and then backing out of the liver and being absorbed into the body, which it's not supposed to do, and that's what was causing all of his symptoms. So the biliary catheter goes directly into the bile ducts from the outside, and it's essentially like a straw that pushes past the tumor and expands that bile duct to allow the bile to drain out, and it drains internally, or for Cody it drained internally, or you can have a bag to the outside to where it drains externally. It just depends on what your diagnosis is, how big your tumor is, where your tumor's at, and what your care team decides is best for you. Luckily, Cody's tube was able to be capped and it just drained internally, and we didn't have to worry about a bag for the majority of the time that he had it. Dr. Dovely put in to have the biliary catheter removed because Cody was doing so well, and actually scheduled us an appointment with Dr. Dovely to have the tumor removed. We were so excited. That was the best possible news we could have gotten at that point. Cody had worked so hard going through 9 months of chemo that we were just so excited to get back to the surgery team. Like, okay, yes, we're gonna beat this. And that was not the case, because for a second time, the surgical team told us, no, we can't do it. And what's interesting is we actually had the appointment with Dr. Vote, and his PA came in. I still have the brochure. I'll put a picture here with his handwriting on it, showing us exactly where they were going to go in and cut out the liver, where the tumor was sitting. Basically, we had our whole pre-op appointment that day, getting everything situated and all the instructions for the night before surgery. Surgery was going to be a week from that day. We had a date. We had an actual date of when we're gonna have that tumor cut out. And 3 days later, I was at work and Cody called me, and I could tell by his voice instantly something was very wrong. I basically ran out of work, and I've always worked with really great hospitals that were very understanding in my situation. And I had someone cover my room, and I said, I've got to go. Something's wrong. And I got home to see him crying at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. And he said Dr. Vote called and said that they can't do it, that they don't think they'll ever be able to do it. They diagnosed him with PSC, primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is the first time we'd ever heard that. I think I covered it very briefly in nursing school, but I didn't understand what it meant in regards to not being able to have surgery. Camera got me off again. It's a scarring disease within the liver and the bile ducts. That is an autoimmune disease, and basically the only treatment for PSC is a liver transplant. So not only did we get told no, we also got told more bad news at the same time, and our beloved surgery date that we had worked so hard for was taken away. They told us that our option was to continue chemo, which historically has not worked, or stop treatment altogether, which also historically has not worked. It's not compatible with life, unfortunately. Or we could go across the street in Houston to Methodist Hospital, where the medical and surgical team had been working with the transplant team at Methodist to create a protocol for patients with bile duct cancer to receive a transplant. Because usually cancer automatically rules you out from being able to receive a transplant. Very rarely are you able to receive a liver transplant with liver cancer, or having liver cancer and receiving a transplant. But they had created this protocol, which very conveniently consisted of months of treatment of the 3 chemos that he had been on. And they said, this is your best bet. You need to be evaluated for liver transplant, get listed, hopefully get listed, and we'll go from there. So that's what we did. And we went through all sorts of stuff, which I will cover our transplant evaluation process in another video, but they ended up listing him and we were excited again, best case scenario. But we knew that he was going to be rather low on the transplant list because he was not as sick as the people that were at the top of the list, and he was stable, and he would be stable for a relatively long time in transplant world, meaning that it's not a first come first served basis when you are being listed for a transplant. It's who's the sickest and who's going to do the best with it. Combination of those two. So basically Cody would have to get much sicker, but not too sick that he wouldn't survive the transplant, but he would have to get much sicker to move up that list. So we could be listed for a year, 2 years before he was sick enough to be transplanted. But we had just spent the last 9 months fighting to get better. And now you're telling us that it has to get worse before it can get better. Just a complete roller coaster. We said, okay, here's our plan. We're going to become listed in as many regions as possible, and we're going to get the word out about Cody so that keeps cutting me off. I don't know how to stop it. I really should read on how to work my own camera. But that's how we ended up at Rochester, Minnesota, was we actually went through their transplant evaluation process, and at the very end, we saw Dr. Gregory Gores, who is head of the hepatology department, and his exact words to Cody were, "You've been a lot of places and you've seen a lot of people. I'm just wondering why you saved the best for last." And we were both kind of sitting there like, excuse me, we've seen so many people that have claimed to be the best. Like, we're not really impressed at this point. Oh, how wrong we were. How to be the best. He was right. He took one look at Cody's scans and says, "You don't have PSC." He said, "I don't know what scans they were looking at. And if they were looking at this ones, I need to come down and show them what they're looking at because it's not PSC." He said, "I'm going to transfer you over to our surgical department to Dr. Rory Smoot, and then they're going to cut it out." What? No. At this point, it's April of 2019. We have been dealing with this since September of 2018, and we've been told twice by the best oncologists in the world that we couldn't take it out. Disclaimer. I'm simply sharing our experience. If you have been to any of the doctors above and have had a great experience or not so great experience, that's fine. Like, that's great. I would hope that people would have had a better experience with said doctors than us. I'm simply sharing what we went through and our thoughts and where we stand. So I just want to throw that out there. I am in no way saying that if you're being treated by any of these doctors that you're doing the wrong thing for you. I don't know your story. I don't know your situation. I don't know what's best for you. And I will 100% always support doing what's right for you, your treatment, your journey. I would also recommend always getting a second opinion, but that's going to be a whole nother video, that in of itself. So back to what I was saying, Dr. Gores said they're going to cut it out. He said, "I'm not putting you on the transplant list. You don't need a transplant. You need a resection." Yeah, okay, bud. Sure, we'll go see your surgeon. He'll tell us the same things we've heard before, that they can cut it out. And then we'll go home and it not happen. We'll go see Dr. Smoot. Great bedside manner, but also very down to earth. He does not sugarcoat it. He is very blunt. He comes right out and says, "Okay, this is this, this is this, and this. This is what I want to do. What do you think?" But he'll also crack a joke with you, and as we've gotten to know him over the last almost 2 years, we've just completely love him, his office, his team, everything about Mayo. I'm getting ahead of myself again. I get excited talking about Mayo. Dr. Smith said they're gonna cut it out. So we're gonna cut it out, come back on July 2nd. This is April. We're like, that's a lot of time for you to change your mind. He said, I'm not gonna change my mind. Okay. And so he had us stop chemo. The months went by. We were very hesitant to tell anybody about our scheduled surgery. We really didn't even tell anybody that we were going and being evaluated for transplants. Just because it's really hard to endure bad news yourself. But then I also felt a huge sense of responsibility to the community that had grown around us and been supporting of us and had prayed for us, made us food, given us hugs, laughed with us, cried with us, donated to us. I felt a sense of responsibility to give them good news. And at this point I didn't have any good news. And I was very afraid to have to tell them good news just to be followed by bad. And so we kept it on very, very quiet. Until July 1st. We flew back up to Mayo the last weekend in June. July 1st had scans, which would determine if the tumor had stayed the same size and if Cody was still a candidate as far as tumor stability and stability on Cody's end from an anesthesia standpoint for that length of a surgery. And it all came back great. And we were approved for surgery. And Dr. Smoot took him back. Well, he didn't take him back. He was in the operating room. The nurse came and took him back. And as I mentioned, I'm an operating room nurse. I'm usually the one taking patients and rolling them out the room, telling their families, okay, time for hugs and kisses, high fives, fist bumps, whatever you desire. We're heading back and we'll see you soon. We'll keep you updated. And I'm the one pushing the stretcher back to the OR. It was very humbling. I might get teary just thinking about watching a stranger rolling back to that OR, especially just knowing everything that goes on back there, the positioning, the timeout process, the intubation process, the surgical process, all of it. And so it was very hard to give up on the reins a little bit because I'd been taking care of him this whole time. So sorry. Anyways, holy. I guess I should warn y'all that this will happen periodically as I look back, because I don't think about this stuff a lot anymore. We've come so far, personally, mentally, emotionally, as a couple, and so it's hard to think back and relive all those emotions and moments and hardships. But so if I just start tearing up randomly talking about stuff, I'm not gonna apologize because there's nothing to apologize for. It's normal, but just bear with me. And they cut it out. They cut it out and they were not able to get clear margins. Unfortunately, his tumor, which I will go do a full video on his specific tumor and where it was at and all of that, but his tumor sat right up against the right hepatic artery. And so they did a left hepatic lobectomy, completely took out the left side of his liver, and were able to get majority of the tumor out, but they did have to leave microscopic single cells, cancer cells behind, because they couldn't go any farther into that artery because you cannot survive without your right hepatic liver artery. How was that? We did have to come back and do 8 weeks of radiation at Mayo. We chose to do it at Mayo. We could have done it. And ever since then, he's been stable. We've had some bumps along the way post-treatment and between surgery and radiation, because they took him about a month and a half between surgery and radiation to recover. Cody actually unfortunately came down with sepsis. He had an infection in the liver post-op. Not super uncommon, just with his history and how long he had the bile duct drain and all that stuff. So we have had bumps along the way post-surgery, but for the most part, that's the best we could have asked for. We just did scans and checkups in December, and those were great. That was pre-COVID, but everything looked great from a malignancy standpoint. There was no evidence of that. And we're just trying to make it to the 2-year mark post-surgery, which would be July 2nd of 2021. And they said if we can get to that point, for the most part, we will be out of the woods. I don't ever like to say the R word because I'll type the R word because I'm very superstitious and I'm not going to say it. But if we are in that, I think that's what this feels like. We just are very thankful for the time we have and how far we've come, and just everything that led up to finding Mayo, everyone that made it possible along the way. It's been an incredible ride. And so we're just really glad to be here. So again, I'm sorry for going so long between videos. I have a new computer now. I'm getting my work schedule figured out, and Cody seems to be in a good place right now. So I'm hoping to have more videos and content up for y'all just as soon as possible. Again, if you want to read more in depth about our story in real time as it was happening, I do have everything up on my blog, codyfight.com. And there's also a Facebook page you can follow, Cody's Fight, Instagram page, Cody's Fight. And I hope that if you're watching this and you're going through a similar journey, keep your head up high. You're doing a great job. And just keep fighting the good fight. So thanks again for watching. Feel free to hit the like button if you so desire. Just subscribe to my channel. Am I official YouTuber if I don't say that at the end of a video? Just kidding. Yeah. Hope you have a great day, and I will see y'all soon. Bye guys.